welcome to The Perspective. My name's Lorie Hartshorn, and I'm delighted to be with you today. Thanks for joining us. Sometimes you can feel a little overwhelmed, can't you, with people up there are making decisions that affect you down here, and sometimes you might feel like you don't have a whole lot of control. I mean, whether you agree or disagree with, the boss, the workplace, or the government, those who are in charge, we all have ripple effects in our life when decisions are made. And that's why I appreciate the work of the EFC, the Evangelical Fellowship of Canada, because they are doing work on our behalf. Sometimes when we feel like maybe our voice doesn't matter, or we don't know where to go to find answers or to even vote or have a informed view, the EFC is there for us. And today we're going to be joined by Beth Hiemstra. She works at the EFC in the area of public policy. And Beth is joining us to discuss the EFC's work on MAiD in Canada. Well, thank you so much, Beth, for being here, because I think we all need a little information in order to know how we can respond in our lives. Things seem to be changing so quickly. And just recently, as of literally the day before this interview, the MAiD statistics have been released. So what can you tell us about the key numbers that maybe stand out to you?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Lori. Well, since the MAiD law was introduced, we've seen the numbers of people who end their lives by MAiD go up pretty steeply year over year. And so the latest report is the numbers from 2023. And so we've seen that trend increase in terms of more people ending their lives by MAiD. It's not quite as steep an increase as the year before, but still very significant. In 2023, 15,000 people ended their lives through MAiD. So if you had 21 people, that would be one person out of those 21 who died in 2023 would have ended their lives by MAiD. I think sometimes it's hard to get a grasp of what these numbers really reflect. They're large numbers. That's 60,000 people who've ended their lives by MAiD since the law has passed. But one of the ways I think this really comes home to us about what's involved in this discussion is the report tells us about the kinds of suffering that people identified as to why they were ending their lives by MAiD. So that's not the disease or disability that made them eligible to end their life, but it's the suffering that led to their request.
Mhm.
And what we see in those 2023 numbers is that almost everyone identified the loss of ability to participate in meaningful activities as a factor. About two-thirds identified dignity, loss of dignity as an issue, and about half said that they felt like a burden to their family or friends or caregivers. In this report, too, one of the really, I found just really tragic and sobering numbers was that for people who weren't dying, who ended their lives by MAiD, what we call track two, almost half of them identified loneliness and isolation as a factor in their decision to end their lives.
That's very powerful, Beth. I think that just really brings this sort of topic of medical assistance in dying from a broad spectrum, hearing thousands of people that are choosing that as an option to end their life, to the rubber meets the road, that they feel they were a burden, they didn't have connection or meaningful relationships in their life. And the issue of isolation and loneliness is really so much that's the epidemic. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I think sometimes we underestimate the power that we have in showing care and love to others, right? That actually we can be the influence perhaps in them making a different choice. There's advance requests for MAiD. If this is a topic of a significant debate, maybe you need to explain what that is, these advance requests, and what are they and why allowing them could have major implications?
Sure, yeah. So right now, what the law requires is that when someone is having their life ended through MAiD, that they're asked at that moment, uh, do they consent to have this go ahead? And they need to be capable of consent, and they need to indicate that they do want to go ahead. But what advance requests for MAiD would do is it would allow someone to say, I want to have my life be ended by euthanasia at some point in the future, even if I can't consent anymore. And so this is a really the requirement to consent is an important safeguard. And the idea of removing that, it's problematic for so many reasons. Um, when somebody first has a diagnosis of a disease, sometimes they can't imagine how they're going to face the future. They can't imagine how they'll experience a loss of capacity, or let's say if they can't recognize family or friends, they feel real distress, and understandably so at that prospect. But we don't know what the future will hold, or how we'll face that. And so sometimes in the moment, a person is content where they didn't expect to be.
Mm.
And in fact, for somebody with memory issues, perhaps they wouldn't remember saying that they wanted to have their life be ended, or they may not understand what's happening in the moment. So, advanced requests raise the prospect that a doctor could come to end a patient's life, a patient who is content, who doesn't remember making a request, and who doesn't know what's happening. It's funny because MAiD is very much a discussion about autonomy, about allowing people to end their lives, the way they want and when they want. But with advanced requests, that is determined by a third person, at least, a doctor or a family member who says, is this the point when a person's life should be ended? And they take on that interpretive role and they decide that, yes, this is the point to end a person's life. And that's its responsibility and its
Mhm.
burden that's put on that person.
Yeah, that is really powerful. And I wasn't aware that this is actually sort of rolling out in a quick manner. I'm sure a lot of our viewers weren't aware of that too. There's so many ramifications to that, as you've just stated. Are you hearing stories about people encountering or being impacted by MAID in various settings? And like, what are some of the examples of the stories you're hearing?
Yeah. Well, just to back up, the good news about that advanced request discussion is that it's just beginning now. And
Okay.
so the federal government is having a consultation this winter about whether to expand MAiD by advanced requests. So the good news is that we do have time to participate in this kind of discussion and to raise concerns where we have them. Um,
That's really good to hear because sometimes we don't know it's already happened and we're like, "Oh, if I had known." So that's a good call to action for each one of us. Let's stay attuned with this. Let's use our voice so that this type of thing will not be passed in Parliament. Are there examples then, some stories that you can share about people who have been impacted by MAID?
Yeah, well, some of the stories that we've been hearing recently that are really concerning are about people who are seeking medical care and who are having made brought up to them when they're not seeking it by medical practitioners and others. Sometimes, numerous times, people will be asked if they've considered MAID. I think it underlines too that this isn't the last resort that was envisioned when the MAID law was passed. It's becoming increasingly normalized, seen as a healthcare option among many. And think of what it's like to be seeking medical care and to have someone ask if you have thought about ending your life, especially when so many people who end their lives through MAID, they feel like a burden already. Like we see that in the government reports. And here are people who are being uh, asked about MAiD without seeking it themselves.
Yeah, boy, that is really powerful, Beth. I can see how being in a troubled situation, you're concerned about your health and well-being, not just maybe your physical health, but your holistic health, your emotional well-being, mental well-being, and then being presented with that as a normalized option. It's very, very concerning. We're going to come right back in just a minute because we want to hear what the EFC is currently doing to address these issues. So stay with us. Well, we're back with Beth Hiemstra from the EFC. Beth, thank you for being with us. And I know I'm already learning a lot about MAiD, medical assistance in dying. We need to keep up on this issue. So thank you for that. Can you just share with us, just give an example of some real life situation of how this is impacting people?
Yeah, well, we're hearing more and more stories from people who've had their doctor or social worker raise MAiD to them as an option that they haven't been seeking when they've been looking for care. And in fact, it seems like kind of a societal expectation, a normalization. This fall, Heather Walkus from the Council of Canadians with Disabilities told a story about she had fallen and bruised her hip. And so she went for physiotherapy for her bruised hip. And her physiotherapist asked her if she had considered MAiD. And just that idea that here you are receiving treatment for a bruised hip physio, and that somebody is asking you if you have considered MAiD. It just seems like it is becoming a normalized part of life to have your life ended by lethal injection, essentially.
Wow. That is shocking to me. I mean, for real. Like, what is the
Mhm.
qualification or what is the standard at which, a practitioner can even ask that question? Certainly needs to be addressed. Wow. I mean, this is certainly a wake-up call, I think, to many of us. What actions is the EFC currently taking then to address issues surrounding MAiD?
Yeah. Well, we really believe that any discussion of medical assistance in dying should be patient initiated, not brought up by the doctor or nurse practitioner or any of the healthcare team. That it is just the patient's initiative to pursue that. And so we think that should be a legal safeguard. It isn't now, but we think that that should be in place. Another protection would be to have MAiD-free spaces where patients can be protected and medical staff who are conscientious objectors. We think it's important to have these kinds of places. So the EFC is advocating for patient-initiated conversations only. We're also looking into intervener status. There are some court cases where there have been challenges of different aspects of the MAiD laws. And so we're looking into applying for intervener status as friends of the court to say we believe that these patient protected and staff protected safe places are important and should be protected, especially in faith-based institutions.
Yeah, that's really helpful because I think sometimes we forget about the
And
practitioners who this goes against their conscience and they're being put in a situation that actually goes against the reason they got into healthcare. I know that I have a few friends that are doctors or nurses and working in that profession, and they have found this to be a very difficult thing to manage. Are you finding that is there more voices rising up even from the medical field that are saying no to this? Because I know that that's a challenge for them in their field.
I think that a lot of doctors are feeling pressured to participate and reluctant to speak up. In some cases, they have work situations where they can cooperate with others who aren't conscientious objectors, but I think for many, they are feeling a lot of pressure to participate against their deeply held beliefs.
Yeah, I'm experiencing that too and hearing that feedback. And so it's great the work of the EFC to create these spaces and also to actually raise it when policies are being made. That we need to pray for the EFC, don't we? We need to pray for those. You have lawyers. What does it look like for the EFC to address this issue? Just from a viewer that we think, who's doing what? Like, what does that look like? Who does the work of the EFC to challenge these things?
Well, we look at engaging on different levels,
Okay.
probably three different levels. So one would be on the government side. We advocate for good laws to put protection in place. So with elected officials, the other place would be in the courts where these things are heard and argued, and only the arguments that are made in court are considered in the decision. And so it's important to be there too. But the other place where EFC works is to try to inform and equip people to become engaged themselves. So to have the average person in the pew feel like they can approach their elected official and ask for change, express concern, and ask for change.
Yeah. Well, that would be my next question. What can someone like me do? What practical steps
Mhm.
can those of us who are concerned? I have aging parents. I'm blessed to still have my
Mhm.
parents. And, there's a lot of decisions to be made when, especially, I know that this doesn't apply to just the elderly, because we also had a young man in our life in his 20s going through a
And
very difficult health crisis. And he was offered this by the doctor and it was approved um, without his parents even knowing about it. Now, fortunately, that got turned around in his case. But so this is something that covers all ages, wouldn't you say? And that's so we need to be involved, not just for elderly, but also for youth. So, what can we do, those of us who are concerned?
yeah, well, that's a great question. I was reading on the weekend in Romans 13, and there's this place in the middle of the chapter where it talks about loving your neighbor and how love is the fulfillment of the law. And then it says in Romans 13, verse 11, it says, "And do this, love your neighbor, with an understanding of the present time." And I think that's really something for those of us just in the pew to think about. How do we love our neighbor, understanding the present time? And so I think there's kind of two ways that we can do that. And the first is we think about the reasons that the suffering that people experience that leads them to choose MAiD, meaning, dignity, feeling like a burden, loneliness. And I think we can reach out to our neighbors, our communities, our extended families, even, and we can express the love of God in practical, tangible ways so that they know that they are loved, that they are not alone, and that there is help. So that's one really key way that I think that all of us can show love to our neighbors. And then in our position at the EFC too, I think another way that we show love to our neighbors is through looking for good laws that protect them. And so anyone can call their local MP and say, "Hey, I'm really concerned about MAiD and its expansion. Could you make sure that the expansion stops? Could you stop MAiD for mental illness? Can you put real, concrete, clear protections in place for patients?" And I think any of us can do that, and it can really make a difference.
And to order to do that, you can go to evangelicalfellowship.ca. Would you have resources and tools there that might even give people the language and what to say when they reach out to their MP?
Oh, absolutely. So that is part of what we are hoping to do. We have resources on our website at theefc.ca/haltmaid, and we have brochures about different areas of MAiD, ways to contact your MP, how to find their contact information, and things that you could say when you do contact them. We're looking ahead to a federal election in 2025, and this is an excellent opportunity to talk to the candidates in your riding and to say, "Hey, I'm concerned. What are your plans? What are you going to do in this area?"
That is excellent, Beth. So efc.ca, did I get that right?
Yes.
Okay,
Ye
check it out. Go there for the resources that you need because I know sometimes we have good intentions, but if we have tools, we'll put it into action. Thank you, Beth, for being with us today. God bless you and the work of EFC. We so appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much, Lori.
We'll be right back.
Hi, my name is Alan Gallant, and I'm the Executive Director of Agora Network Ministries, a ministry that wants to resource you as a believer in Jesus and resource the church. So we provide an academy, we provide seminars, and we provide conferences for you to get help for your own mental health and for your church. So if you want to reach out to us, go to our website, agoranetworkministries.com for help.
Hi, my name's Ryan Walter, and I played a long time in the National Hockey League. So long ago, I played against the Philadelphia Flyers back in the day when they were the Broad Street Bullies. Let's talk about fear. We had some fear. You couldn't be alive and not be afraid in that situation. But you know what's interesting is Napoleon says there's two great levers to move men, fear and interest. But you know what Jesus says? This is crazy. He says, fear not, right? 365 times in the Bible, apparently, it says, fear not. So this week, let's not fear. Let's believe in Jesus.
So, what do you do when life gets hard? When you feel like you've been punched in the proverbial gut, when the doctor says, I'm sorry, when the relationship you thought would last forever, well, it comes to an end. Maybe the job you relied on is no longer there. What do you believe about God in those moments? Is he good? Does he care? We often avoid these tough questions until we're actually forced to face them head on, right? But we believe about God when life is hard is critical. In one of my favorite authors, Anne Voskamp, in her recent book, Waymaker, she writes, unless you commit ahead of time to what you will believe about God, the circumstances will dictate what you should believe about God's heart. And I couldn't agree more. I've learned that the only way to navigate life's most challenging moments is to anchor myself in what I know to be true about God. He is good and he does care. You see, this belief isn't just something I cling to maybe feel better in the moment. It's actually rooted in truth, both in scripture and from my own life. First, the Bible contains many stories revealing God's goodness and his care. Over and over, we see him stepping into the lives of his people with love and compassion and power. I mean, think about Daniel, these young guys and his friends. God protected them in the lion's den and the fiery furnace. He was literally there. He delivered an entire nation out of slavery, guiding them into the promised land. Even on the cross, we see in the middle of unimaginable suffering, Jesus cared for those around him, asking John to take care of his mother. And then there's the ultimate expression of God's love in Romans 5:8. But God demonstrates, shows his own love for us in this: while we were still sinners, far from God, Christ died for us. See, that's not just a nice thought, it's the foundation of everything we believe about God's heart. If he loved us enough to actually sacrifice his son, even when we were far from him, how could he not care for us now? Second, I've experienced his love and care in my own life. God has been my already steady companion in seasons of loneliness, in loss, in uncertainty. When I didn't know how I'd make it through, he carried me. There have been many moments when I didn't see his hand at work until actually much later. But looking back, I can see so clearly how he was either protecting me or providing for me and always guiding me. He has answered prayers for my children, for my own healing, and for peace. His presence been actually my greatest strength. He's the thing that God just loves to care and love on all of us. And he doesn't always remove the pain or the suffering. Instead, he shines through it. Because of the pain and suffering, in those very moments, his love becomes very tangible. Through his word, through prayer, and often through people around us, he places those people in our life to actually show us how much he loves us. So, what do you believe about God today? Will you believe that he is good, that he cares, even when life is hard? If you don't settle that in your heart now, your circumstances might try to convince you otherwise. So here's a promise to hold on to. Isaiah 41 says, "So don't fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. For I am the Lord your God, who takes hold of your right hand and says to you, do not fear, I will help you." So if you're feeling overwhelmed in life, picture God holding your hand. He's there strengthening, helping, walking with you through every valley. Let's commit together to living courageously, knowing that no matter what hard thing comes our way, God is good and he cares. I want to thank you for joining us today. What a powerful reminder that we're to show God's love and care to others, those who may be going through a difficult time and feeling they're a burden, and maybe even making the choices to take their own life. Would you come alongside someone and remind them that they're loved, that they're valued, that they have worth, and show God's love and care to them? Because we know that God loves them, and sometimes he's calling us to demonstrate that love. If you need that reminder today, call us at 1-855-910-6297. We're here for you. Our prayer partners are there to answer your call. And if you can email us, prayer@theperspective.tv. You can go on the website and request a copy of the monthly devotional that Mike supplies. Theperspective.tv is where you want to go for resources, for help, for support. But I just have a feeling there's someone that's watching today. You're feeling that you're being a burden. You're feeling that you're not loved or cared for. Can I just remind you today that God loves you, that he sees you, that he cares for you. Do not feel like a burden. You're a dearly loved child of God. Give us a call today if you need prayer. And thanks for watching.